Hey, we're solving limits analytically. We have the limit of x minus 1 over 1 minus the square root of x as x approaches 1, I'm claiming is equal to negative 2. We do the direct substitution, plugging 1 directly in for x. As you can see here, we end up with 0 over 0. So this is an indication that we need to manipulate this thing in such a way so that we get a new function. So let's take a look at this. Hey, so the technique that we are using here is multiplying the denominator by its conjugate, and I'm writing the conjugate up in the numerator. So 1 plus the square root of x over 1 plus the square root of x cancels out as just 1. So after working several of these limits, you'll start seeing patterns and things that you need to do. So once I've multiplied the denominator by its conjugate, we FOIL this out, we end up with 1 minus x. So if you've forgotten how to multiply, you would take 1 times 1, and you'd get 1 squared, which is just 1, and then 1 times the square root of x. And then the negative square root of x times 1. Now those two terms will cancel out. 1 times the square root of x is x, and negative square root of x times 1 is just negative square root of x. And so they cancel out. And then last we have the negative square root of x times square root of x, and the square root of x times the square root of x is just x, except it's negative. So as you can see here, we have a 1 and a square root of x, a 1 and a square root of x. If we have a minus and a plus, so as we FOIL this out, our outside and our inside terms cancel out. So really it's just 1 times 1, which is 1, and the negative square root of x times the positive square root of x, and you get x. And the inside stuff cancels out. Okay, so what we have now is we have an x minus 1 in the numerator and a 1 minus x in the denominator. But I have factored a negative out of the denominator, and we can rewrite this now as a negative and in parentheses negative 1 plus x. If you take this negative and you distribute it back inside the parentheses, we would get 1 minus x. And the reason we did this now is so we have something in the denominator now that matches a term up here in the numerator. I can rewrite this negative 1 plus x as x minus 1. And as you can see, we have the x minus 1 here. So they're going to cancel out. And then I'm going to take this negative and just bring it out front. And so now we're left with a new function. We have the limit of negative, and in parentheses, 1 plus the square root of x as x approaches 1. And so now we can do the direct substitution, plugging 1 directly in, and you'll have 1 plus 1, which is 2, but then we have the negative outside that we need to carry. So our limit is equal to negative 2. Let's look at the graph. So we were approaching 1, and we locate 1 on the x-axis. Now remember, we're coming in from the left-hand side, approaching 1, and we're coming in from the right-hand side, approaching 1. So pick something to the left of 1, ride the graph along, and it is approaching negative 2, as you can see here on the y-axis. And then we come in from the right-hand side, right, and so we just locate the graph. As x gets closer and closer, it's approaching negative 2. Now this could be the graph of f of x or the graph of g of x, but I'm going to consider this the graph of the very first function, except there's a hole in the graph and it's right here. But nevertheless,